This Choircast podcast episode is brought to you by Maria Francesca French, author of the newly released book, Safer Than the Known Way, A Post-Christian Journey. It's an exploration of the promise of faith from a post-Christian perspective. What does it mean to speak beyond binaries of theism and atheism, conservative and liberal, fact and fiction? Why might a new type of theological imagination, one that defies categories and comparison, with the challenge actual deconstruction offers, be all that is next? Here you will find a compelling read of story and personal journey with strong scholarship and deep theology, significant and transformational thought that has lived in the ivory tower for too long but made accessible and resonant. Read along as the tables are turned, head towards a horizon with no line, and follow a compass that doesn't point north. Prepare to be beckoned by ghosts and travel a path unknown, because to go out into the elegant chaos of all that might be waiting for us after Christianity while still engaging in meaningful faith is safer than all that might be considered certain. If you have moved past traditional notions of God, beyond mechanisms of belief, and find yourself relentlessly curious about what might be next, this book is for you. This and more in my new book, Safer Than the Known Way, A Post-Christian Journey, out now.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat Turney. I'm here with my brother John, who is currently snowed in the little mountains up there in northern. I said little because they're
well, they are little compared to the Rockies. They're little.
Not the Rockies or nothing. But anyway,
no.
So say hi to everybody, John.
Hi, everybody. John.
Good. All right, that's good. We're still on track. I tried to get John to say something earlier that he wouldn't say.
I
which
did.
Was that
you finally found what I wouldn't say.
I said that the Dallas Cowboys suck, and he would not say it. But
nope.
Also, just as an added treat, and just for giggles and laughs, we have another co-host with us tonight, and this is Bethany Shea. Say hi, Bethany.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going really great.
Good.
So this is our first attempt at 3 hosts, because this next guest really requires 3 people to rein him.
He
in
really
and keep
does.
him on task.
He really does.
I mean, we all know. So I don't have a huge bio, because if you don't know Matt Distefano by now, I'm not sure what rock you've been living under. But Matt Distefano, what can we say about him? Renaissance man, Tolkien lover, publisher, artist, author, musician, pothead, all kinds of cool stuff you can say about Matt. Most of which are positive. He's written some amazing books like From the Blood of Abel and How to Not Be a Dick. Heretic. He second only to Keith Giles in output of volume. Plus, he's got some awesome stuff in the works that hopefully we'll touch on some of that tonight. But the newest thing that we're here to talk about tonight is the book called The Wisdom of Hobbits, which is set to be released soon. It's already making its rounds amongst the Tolkien elites. All the people are talking about it. And it's fixing to drop. I'm sure you'll tell me the exact date that it will be available to purchase. But that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Hobbits and Tolkien and who knows, marijuana. I don't know, whatever else comes up to mind. Hopefully we all have a drink in hand, because it's going to become pretty necessary soon. Welcome back to the podcast, Matt. What's up, bud?
Hey, what's up? I think pipeweed is what we can call it.
Yeah,
right.
Allegedly, it's tobacco, but I pretend it's not. So,
there's an awful lot of allusion to marijuana usage inside of the Lord of the Rings. I mean, your love of the love of the Hobbits' long leaf is dulled your sense or something like that. How's that go? When he accuses,
but to be fair, it is. I think we're reading it anachronistically, and it's actually tobacco. Long bottom leaf, South Lynch, South Farthing's finest.
Right.
It's a variety of tobacco, but since it's called pipeweed, I just pretend it's weed.
All right.
And, I'm a special kind of hobbit. I'm a hobbit from Cali.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with an anachronism or two amongst friends.
That's right. 100%.
So, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just give us a little idea of what this book entails, what it's about, who is intended for, the target audience. Maybe that might help you as well.
Well, I do want Tolkien nerds and scholars and aficionados to enjoy it. I don't know if you read Tolkien as much as I do, I don't know if you would read it and necessarily learn anything new about Tolkien's world. I hope that you would gain insights. Addison Hodges Hart made the comment in his endorsement that it's like kind of a book about hobbits, but it's really a book about humans. So I hope that people would get that connection. I use hobbits as a model for bettering human behavior, our own, being more connected with each other and the world. I don't idealize hobbits because I don't idealize humans. I think we're messy and so are hobbits. And I try to make that connection. And I'm really just, if you watched Jackson's films or if you read The Hobbit in junior high, then this book is for you. You know, if you're a casual fan, if you liked the movies and maybe you read the books once or no more than once or something or twice. I mean, I want to write to a broad spectrum of people, but I mean, look at you can try to write as broadly as possible. You're never going to write for everyone. And so I'm really trying to, it's like a bell curve. Like if you're a scholar, I hope you would appreciate the book. And if you've never, I mean, the biggest endorsement I got was that one of my editors had never watched the films or read the books, and her husband was trying to get her to watch the films their entire marriage. And it wasn't until after she read and edited my book that they watched the films. And then she sat down to read the books, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that was the best endorsement that I ever received.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, I still can't get my wife to sit through Star Wars. So I mean, maybe if you write a book about
with Tolkien.
Do me a favor, write a nice book about Star Wars, and maybe I'll get her to sit down and watch that with me. But
I recommend The Dharma of Star Wars. It's really good.
The Dharma of Star Wars sounds good.
Matthew, you said about how you kind of humanize the hobbits, and when I was reading your book, I totally felt that with Smeagol and Gollum. You know, I know they're the same character necessarily, but like how Frodo, I wrote down in my notes, Frodo humanized him, but then I wrote hobbitized because it's not a human, but it was so good to see that and to hear that.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes Tolkien's characters really complex. And for me personally, I don't care if it's a film or a book or a video game. I just got done playing The Last of Us on PS5, and like the story is phenomenal. I have to play games that have good character development and character driven. And so the books that I read are the same. And that's what I just love about them. I mean, you can break them up into villains and heroes, but it's not really realistic because you need Gollum at the end because, let's be honest, Frodo doesn't throw the ring in the fire. Spoiler alert.
Wait. What?
You just have to. You need to put aside 12 hours and watch the extended version so you can start with that.
I missed a whole big plot point. Oh well.
There's a huge plot point you missed. That's when Dumbledore does his. No, I don't know.
That's when Darth Vader comes out of the lava.
He comes out of the lava. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, no, you're right. That was one of the. I did watch the review that you posted on your timeline. One of the comments that the reviewer made was that it was nice to see a treatment of hobbits that was not idealized.
Sure.
Because we do have this tendency to do that with hobbits or characters like that. They live in this idyllic, little community, and they're so in touch with everything. And obviously, there were good and bad hobbits. There were good and bad character traits that were either emphasized or de-emphasized. And so is there kind of a delineation there then between, listen, maybe my less adventurous side goes this way and wants to sort of homestead and stay home and then the other side is more adventurous, and there's sort of a human parallel there? Well,
I think we see that in Bilbo. Bilbo has a Baggins side and a Tookish side. The Took family is known for like adventuring and, being extraordinary and not like most hobbits. Most hobbits are homebodies. And I try to point out the fact that if we don't balance the two, we risk. It doesn't mean we're going to. There's nothing wrong with just being home all the time. My best friend is home all the time. Like that's what he likes to do. But I'd say there is a risk there in terms of being too insular and shutting yourself off from others. And then you become, or you can become judgmental and xenophobic. Obviously, my best friend's not like that. I'm just saying, as a society, if we section ourselves off too much, then we end up, when we come across those that are different, we tend to run the risk of being really leery of them simply for their race or their gender or their color or their creed, their sexual orientation, whatever the case may be. And Tolkien doesn't get explicit like that. He's not talking in terms of race or color or sexual orientation. But I think we can draw those parallels out to modern society.
Well, yeah, I see even in like Samwise Gamgee, right? You can see a conservative side of him as he is trying to convince Frodo that Gollum is inherently evil. There's nothing good about Gollum, and so there's that undertone of Samwise that is being. It's really hard for me, right? Because Samwise is one of my favorite characters of the whole
He's my
series.
favorite. Yeah, he's my favorite.
He's in a lot of situations, he's the hero of the whole book. Frodo's not the hero. Samwise is the hero. But there's this undertone that has been taught to him, like has been taught to us, that someone like Gollum is the other. And we have to distance ourselves from the other. And so in this way, Samwise is trying to save Frodo from this quote unquote, and I'm like big air quotes, other, which is Gollum. But at the end of it, Gollum is the one who saves Frodo. Gollum in a weird way, right?
Well, because again, with the spoiler alerts, thanks.
Again, sorry.
Thanks.
If you haven't read these damn books by now,
that's on you. That's on you.
That's absolutely on you. If you have not read or watched these movies, it's absolutely on you.
That's a nice elitist point of view, John. Very elitist of you.
If a book is going in public domain in 17 years, yeah, that's definitely on you.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that we all battle this other cult, this other version of ourselves? I think, right? I think I battle this every day when it comes to dealing with the marginalized within my community, the people who are what we want to call meth heads, right? That I deal with on a daily basis, which I would consider somewhat like a Gollum. I can completely ignore them, or I can embrace them and find humanity in them. And I think at the end of the day, Frodo and Samwise Gamgee both find humanity within Gollum before he decides to make this. I don't want to call it sacrifice, because I don't think he even knew he was making a sacrifice.
No.
But he obviously pushed the inevitable into the correct direction, right?
Yeah, and it's a tough balance, because I get it. Like, Gollum's not to be trusted. Like, there's no one in their right mind should trust Gollum. So Sam is, of course, like, it's understandable that he's leery, but then the balance of it is that, and I point this out in the book, that the thing that saves Middle Earth is not some huge act of heroism. What saves Middle Earth, as you kind of allude to with Gollum being there, is Bilbo's and Sam's and Frodo's mercy and pity on Gollum, because they, for all intents and purposes, the rational mind says to do away with Gollum because he's much more risky keeping around than he is just getting rid of. And we could all understand, like, had they killed Gollum, yeah, I can see that. I could see that's a smart choice. Like, get rid of this guy because he's going to stab you in the back when you're sleeping. And he's going to take the ring for himself because he's only driven by one thing. But what Tolkien makes uncomfortable for us is that through that act of mercy and pity, Gollum eventually does save all of Middle Earth, including Frodo and all of our favorite hobbits, not by consciously self-sacrificing, but he was just so tied up with the ring that when he goes down with it, it's kind of like a poetic justice sort of thing that he's annihilated at the same time as the ring. And I think the more we reflect on that, the more uncomfortable it is, because it's like, what's that line? The line of good and evil runs down the middle of all of us. All of Tolkien's characters, that's true of.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just on a spectrum and maybe a bell curve of some sorts, but it's there in some way.
Is there anything that you touched on in the book that's mimetic? Because all of that seems to me like what drives Gollum is desire, right? This all-encompassing, this obsession with this one thing that ultimately leads to his demise. But I don't know if that was within the purview of your book. Did you touch on mimetic desire at all?
In a roundabout way, because I've written so extensively about mimetic theory, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself and make this a book about like using Lord of the Rings as a book on mimetic theory. Although it just clicked in my head that I'm going to.
You totally could.
I'm definitely going to. So right at some point I'm going to. But announcement.
I heard it first.
Yeah, you heard it first.
I just want an acknowledgement in the book somewhere. That
I got you. No, I got you.
Sorry,
I got you. I'll give you a whole first page on how, in the preface, on how this came to be.
Nice.
I intentionally wanted to talk about it, but without quoting Girard or using my mimetic theory language.
Sure.
So I wanted actually us to not think of that consciously, and then be mimetic with the hobbits that I'm trying to convey here. Because so I want us to see them in how I'm portraying them as a way to, if we imitate, we can become better versions of ourselves.
For sure. No, I think that's a great approach. I love it.
But the next one is going to be the next one I'm definitely going to get on.
Then it's just going to be, Tolkien versus Girard, or Tolkien and Girard. The mimetic desire in the Lord of the Rings. The title writes itself. I mean,
yes, it does.
Me and like 2 other people will buy it. It'll be amazing.
Hey, so I'm hoping my mom too.
I was curious about the pity and mercy part, because I feel like that was such an important aspect that you brought in about how Frodo and Samwise was able to humanize, I suppose, Gollum. And that you talked a lot about free will, and what does free will actually look like for somebody who is somebody who's not choosing good, but actually choosing evil? Are they stuck in those sorts of systems that are keeping them choosing things that are actually problematic for them? And so I guess within that, I was curious. I know we're talking about a book, but I'm also curious about you as a person. Have you had a moment in your life where you've actually had to receive pity and mercy from somebody else, or were you were able to bestow that upon somebody, where you were able to humanize somebody that oftentimes is dehumanized because of their behaviors?
Yeah. So the initial thing that comes to mind is my work in social work. I've been doing social services for a long time. And I started in a juvenile hall and teaching as a long-term substitute when I had my credential in a juvenile hall school. And then I went into group homes and managed group homes. And yeah, it's when I have debates or discussions, I should say, about free will, I just think of the kids who have obvious trauma and intergenerational trauma that has been passed on, and that they continue to pass on more often than not. And to see how difficult it is for them to break that. At some point, we all have to break this intergenerational trauma. And some of us have just had more passed on than others. Often, Black and brown folks more often than white folks. So I see that there is a level of free will. It's just cluttered and convoluted and confused under the weight of trauma and sometimes just chemistry and biology. So there's this almost nature and nurture thing going into it. So to say that we all have, when we say the blanket statement, we all have free will, as if the playing field is even. And I think we don't have to get all philosophical, though I do a little bit in the book. But for our purposes here, like, if you just open your eyes and look at society, you know that the playing field's not even. And so the way I see free will is if someone's choosing behaviors that are harmful to themselves or others, then they're not operating with a level of free will that we like to think that we have. It's possible, but some have such a starting place that is way below or way back there that they have to work through so much more. And we have to have empathy, and we have to have pity on people who struggle with that. And because we all struggle with that to some degree. We're all working through our shit. And I think that if we continue to work, it's my belief that we end up having more and more free will as we work through our stuff.
Well, and I think Brad Jersak talks about the difference between free will and freed will.
Sure.
Right. And I think this idea that free will, it's with blinders on, right? So we all have this idea that we have free will, but we have free will within the confines of the way we were raised, the information that we were given, the pluses or minuses that we are given towards bettering ourselves within society. So this idea of free will is sometimes academic. It's kind of, it doesn't really hold true for everybody because we're all, like you said, Matthew, we're on different playing fields where our starting point is different, right? And so when you come to using this as a connection to Hobbits or even Middle Earth in general, is that this idea that the Hobbits have this idea of their idea of what they get, when then we have this idea of what the elves have, right, within their free will, and how these or the dwarves or all. I think Tolkien does a really good job of showing these different societies at different levels and giving us this opportunity to see these elves as almost angelic, right? But then when we get to know them, we realize that they aren't really as angelic as we think they are. Yeah. That their undertone is sometimes nefarious, right?
Yeah, sometimes, and sometimes super, like if we, Beren and Luthien, that story, there's some racism even there, where a human can't work in the court of an elf because you're just, so it's, and elves, like there's this whole idea, it's almost they become static and they're not they're like trying to preserve this almost nostalgic idea of what they think existence should look like, and in that they fail to live in some ways.
Mm.
Yeah,
it's interesting though. I'll go back to the review that I watched, partly because he touched on this topic of free will for a little bit. Wanted to get your reaction to his criticism of. I think he felt it necessary to start out with some criticisms and then, talk about the things he liked about the book later on. But some of his criticisms were aimed at this idea of free will, and that like for a non-academic book, you got a little academic when it came to the free will. Yeah. And knowing you, I was like, well, of course he would. Like we're right in Matthew's wheelhouse now. Tolkien is the wheelhouse, but when you start talking about these larger issues of free will and theodicy and other things, I'm like, oh, now you're right smack dab in the middle of what Matt knows real well. Yeah. So is that I didn't think it was like a hardcore critique, but I don't think him coming from a theological background got what you were trying to do with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I liked that he was honest in his review. I feel like his critiques, I would like to comment on some of them because I don't think they were completely representative of what I put in the book, and he's entitled to his opinion. And I'd rather have someone give a fair critique than someone who's just either 1 star, this book sucks, or 5 star, this is the greatest book of all time. And right. We get a lot of that in society, right? There's hardly any nuance. So I like that he had nuance. On the free will thing, he had mentioned it gets a little heavy, but then he did give me a nod that I keep it simple for people to understand.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was my goal. So I'm glad he noticed that. The one, I had an issue with, he did mention some in the free will chapter. I do touch on theodicy, right? The question, and I don't mention God hardly at all in this book. I never actually say the words God. I don't think. Eru Iluvatar is God in Elvish in the Silmarillion, so I use that name. And I only really talk about that in the free will chapter and maybe a mention here and there because I don't know, hobbits are pretty much a secular society. There's not like religious texts that we know of, right? So when it came to theodicy, he had said I introduced that I'm going to talk about theodicy and then I give the answer that no answer is going to be satisfactory. But then he doesn't expand on that. And that was kind of my frustration with it a little bit because I do say that, but I say it in the context of if you're suffering and I start giving you a theodicy, no answer is satisfactory to someone who's suffering. And then I do give an answer because it's a book and I said I would. So I do give a theodicy and it's not extensive. I call the section a humble theodicy. So I'm not boasting about the genius of how can a good God exist in a world full of suffering. I simply give 2 answers, which is that there, in Tolkien's Legendarium, there is a time where there's going to be a second music and that's going to be void of suffering. So we view all suffering with the end in mind, and that's going to be gone. So just like the Buddhists would have the Four Noble Truths, the last one is that there is an end to suffering. So they don't give an answer on, they don't give like this some Calvinistic answer on why they're suffering and how can a God of prophet, all this stuff that we talk about in the West. The Buddhists just say there's suffering exists, there's a reason for suffering, there's a way out of suffering, and there's an end to suffering. So all I say is we look at it at the end, and we have to admit that the story itself doesn't exist without suffering. We have no great literature like The Lord of the Rings without some sort of suffering. If we read a story about suffering, we don't resonate with them because as humans, we wouldn't have suffered. So so it's not a great answer because there are no great answers, but I give an answer. And I wish the reviewer, I wish Josh would have mentioned that because I do give an answer and it's there. Yeah. It's in the book.
And even if you just step outside of Tolkien and that sort of narrow frame of reference, there's no good answer to the Odyssey, period.
None.
I've never heard a satisfactory,
none.
Guys like Tom Ord have gotten really close. Mark Karras has gotten really close, and even they will tell you, it's not entirely satisfactory though.
Hey, I heard David Bentley Hart, which is the smartest person I know, say that the only great question atheists should ask is the problem of suffering, and we don't have a great answer.
That's right.
So if David Bentley Hart acknowledges that, who the hell am I going to give you some treatise on theodicy? I'm not, and I know that. So I gave a humble one that was just like, but I gave something, and so I wish that was contextualized in the review.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like I'm just blowing smoke, because I wouldn't just do that. I think it's a bold move to bring it up at all.
Yeah,
and I think within the context of free will, it needs to be there.
Yeah,
but I think it was a bold move to do it.
Well, and I wrote a couple notes as I was listening to that review as well, and first of all, I don't want to feel like we're just
we haven't even named it. It's cool, man.
Right. Well, and we haven't beat. I don't want to feel like we're beating a dead horse of this person, but this idea that theodicy and you don't give an answer, right? That God is good and what?
Shit happens. That's what Brad would say.
Shit happens. Well, one of the greatest books I've ever read by Rob Bell also doesn't give us an answer at the end. And I think it's done on purpose because we really don't have the answer because we don't know the mind of God, if God exists at all, as to why suffering exists, right?
Yeah, and then I think Josh's point would have been like, then don't bring it up.
Yeah,
but I think we need to bring it up. I think that's the point. We need to bring it up. If suffering is what this world seems to end up in over and over and over again, we need to ask. We absolutely need to talk about this, and I think the answer is that God is saying, well, what the fuck are you doing to stop suffering?
Well, it's the only universal experience.
Yeah.
Right?
It really is.
I really don't. I think you can live your entire life, and many, many people do, and never really experience joy. But none of us get out of this without some suffering. I thought it was interesting that The Matrix, when it first came out, one of the first points about The Matrix was that they had to introduce misery and suffering into the Matrix for humans to accept it. Why? Because it's so integral to our human experience that if you were suddenly devoid of it, something would feel off. Doesn't give a good answer for where God stands and all of that, but just to acknowledge it as a common universal human experience, I think is pretty powerful. But I think it's an interesting point to bring into a discussion of Hobbits. I think it's great and it's a way to get into the subject of not idealizing everything and saying, look, even within Hobbiton society, there is likely suffering, and there is probably pettiness and jealousy, and there's all these range of human emotions that come into play. You see that at play throughout the movies as well, where you watch the sort of infighting between the elves and the dwarves, and there's jealousy and covetousness. I bring a little term in there for you. So
bring the Bible in.
Well, someone's got to. Go ahead.
I think that there's just a certain amount of tension that we're supposed to live with in life. And living in that tension isn't solving everything with an answer, because answers are usually platitudes, and no one who's suffering needs more platitudes in their life. That. So I think that you talk about this really, really well, Matthew, with the tension of the hobbits living in the midst of adventure, these specific hobbits living in the midst of adventure and the simple life. Like, how do I take, which you see throughout the entire book, not just your book, but just the Lord of the Rings, you see this like tension that they live with as hobbits, seeking adventure while also seeking the simplicity of friendship and the common life amongst the adventure. And it doesn't come easy to them, but I think it seems like it forges reliability in each other. It forges a friendship that wouldn't have been as gritty and robust as it would have been if they stayed in the Shire. So living in tension is just part of what it means to be human. And I think that you really captured that really well in this book, for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. I use the word balance, but I like the word tension too, because there is tension one way to the other when you do balance. And I don't particularly give you an answer in the book on how to do it. It's a lot about being present and being open and being willing. But I wanted to shy away from like giving too many on like, now this is what you do, because then I've pigeonholed it and your experience might be different. My goal is to like give you kind of the overarching ideas and then figure it out in your own life what that means for you.
Well, let's talk about gardening.
Sure.
Because that's a very natural segue.
Yeah.
This is my job on the podcast.
You are a pro, man. I tell you.
He really is. I
haven't asked you my at least once in a podcast. I just asked you a question like, so what's up with that? I did think it was funny, and again, we're beating on the review because it's the only one I've seen. So, but he did go to bring up first of all, he kind of bashed on your drawings. I thought that was kind of lame.
He's like, I have to agree with that.
I missed that. I thought he said they were cool.
He just said they were kind of pointless and like looks like he's got some sort of hand done drawings here.
Your drawings,
they're fine.
From my perspective, remind me of the original Tolkien books that I had.
Oh, cool.
So
did you draw them?
Yeah, I drew them.
And they honestly remind me of, because I've had different versions of the Fellowship of the Rings over the years, and there are a lot of like hand drawings within some of those earlier publications of Lord of the Rings, and that's what they remind me of. And they are reminiscent of a better time for me. So I really enjoyed them.
Well, thank you. I think that I didn't give like a why did I put that in there. I was simply trying to just bring you into the world in a different way. Like I felt as if, okay, I want them to be simple, and I want it to be just kind of rough around the edges in a intentional way, because I don't see like the actual, like if I just look at the actual landscape of the Shire, it's not beautiful because it's overly like clean and kempt. It's allowed to be like a lot of permaculture yards. They don't look pretty to the, I would say, indoctrinated mind, where you want to see a square grass and you want to have a perfectly, it doesn't look pretty at first until you realize the beauty of it. And so I wanted it to capture that sort of like grittiness, and like I was just sitting in the Shire sketching in my notebook, and that's what I wanted it to kind of convey.
Well, that brings up a good point of, talking about permaculture, right? Which I think Tolkien, I don't know if he knew if that was a language he would have been familiar with.
The term wasn't around yet, but
right. But permaculture is something that definitely hits us now.
Yeah.
This idea of like, do you really need a really pretty green lawn in the front of your...
Not in California.
Right. Or would it be better to have something that actually produces something for you, right? So I live in Matthew and I have talked about this before. I live on 23 acres, and my goal is to at some point create an environment that has natural and plants that would have grown here just because, right? Not because we put them here, but because this is where they naturally would be. So I'm starting with a small garden, which I think Matthew can understand because his is larger than mine. And this idea, and the Hobbits have a better understanding of permaculture than we do, which is this idea of connection to the land that opens up this idea of creating an environment that grows what is necessary here, right? So we have become a commercial society that says, well, I can get strawberries 365 days a year. I can get corn 365 days a year. That's not what permaculture says. That's not what the environment says. I should be growing what exists now, right? And so to create an environment where we have these gardens within our society that allows us to have this growth within our society, but we have created a society that says, I want what I want and I want it now. Right?
Yeah, I think it's okay to balance the importing, exporting, and things like that. But I think we just need to lean way more to the local. Like I think it's great that we can get, if I want an avocado right now, that I can get it. But the point being, when I'm in spring, summer, fall, not so much winter. Okay, if I have a squash plant that has 3 squashes on it and they're huge and they're going to get big and inedible, I should probably eat squash for the next 3 days or whatever. Use what you have now. And so I think that would be the point. Do what is natural as much as you can and, let modern society fill in the gaps. I just think we rely way too much on the gaps rather than being in touch with what's in front of us here. Yeah. And can I say one other critique about this review?
Please do.
Because it has to do.
I'm not done yet, man. We got plenty to say about this dude.
Oh, okay.
No, good.
No, I mean, no disrespect. I talked with him for a couple of months. He was gracious enough to give me an endorsement. I sent him a copy of the book and everything, and no disrespect at all. But I do have my major critique of the review would be that because I mentioned climate change, that's somehow political. Now, let me give you a context. I don't see climate change as such as political. Just because it's been politicized doesn't mean it's quote unquote political as such. I mean, I just see it as a cause and effect thing. It seems that humans are fully capable through war and scorched earth policy and way too much carbon and industry, which Tolkien himself critiques heavily, and I point that out, that the effect of that causation is the average temperature goes up quicker than had we not been involved. Because yes, no one is saying there's not ebbs and flows in climate. We're just saying that it is exacerbated by human behavior in the modern world.
Yeah, exactly.
That is not political. I'm not making a political statement. So, and that's as far as I go. That's as far as I go in the book. I don't say in the book, therefore, we need to do SB 1304 and we need to join this and this and this. And we need to, no, I just made up those numbers. I have no idea what the Senate bills are. It sounded good, right?
It did sound good. I believed you.
I didn't say any of that. So I think he took a non sequitur. He took a leap of logic by just because I mentioned climate change doesn't mean I'm making a political statement or standing behind a certain candidate. Now, I do think we should, personally, I didn't mention this in the book, maybe in passing, that we should support candidates or policies that curb the effects of climate change. But I'm not getting overly political just by mentioning climate change. And that's a pet peeve of mine, is just because we say something that happens to be politicized does not mean we stand with all the politicians who also say the same thing. I'm not saying that.
Oh, you definitely, you named the book The Wisdom of the Hobbits. And it's not just wisdom that's out there in the ether that we're just like, oh, look at those great hobbits. Like, you're wanting to help, at least from what I could gather, you're wanting to help people connect in their day-to-day lives with that wisdom. How do we actually take that and then put it into our everyday, ordinary lives, like Paul writes in Romans. I'm a pastor, so sometimes I'll bring in Jesus and things into this.
That's fine. It's your show.
How dare you? How
dare you?
But part of the thing that you're talking about within that sense of balance or tension is, how do we take that wisdom and then put it into our everyday, ordinary lives with, stop wasting plastic. You write about that. You write about permaculture, and you write about planting a garden within the soil that already exists that you have. And you do say, like, to support certain spaces that look like they'll continue forth in the ways that we're designed to live, where we're supposed to care for and cultivate this earth in the most caring and compassionate way. So I wouldn't say that's political. That's just what it means to be a good human.
Yeah. And that's part of my big peeve of just because I mentioned that. Look, I mean, conservative, liberal, progressive, right wing, like you should care about the planet you're on, like that. I mean, good God. And this is the this is the tactic that I use when I talk to people who don't affirm quote unquote climate change. I say, okay, let's take climate change out of this. Do you think it is good to bulldoze most of the Amazon forest? Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think it's going to have negative impact? Well,
negative impact.
There you go. Do you think it's good that there is a trash pile twice the size of Texas in the Pacific Ocean? Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a very good thing.
Very good.
Well,
okay.
I mean, if you're looking at like creating one of those islands that we can live on,
you're right. What's interesting to me is this distinction that we've made, and I think this is purely a sort of 20th, 21st century Western concept, but political then is interchangeable with partisan.
Sure, yeah.
I think you're making political statements in so much as we're talking about the way that we as humans interact with our world, and that's politics. It doesn't have to have a damn thing to do with partisan politics.
Sure.
Well, and on top of that, I mean, you have, someone like Trump who says, make America great again. And when he talks about make America great again, he means the Leave It to Beaver household with the perfectly groomed lawn.
Are we still talking about that asshat?
Well, he's
the leader of the Republican Party at the moment.
He's the leader of the Republican Party. But so we have this notion of Leave It to Beaver, right? With this perfectly groomed front lawn, which is diametrically opposed to what you're saying, which is like, hey, instead of putting in this great useless front lawn, how about we create a garden that creates, which honestly, if you go back to World War II or World War I, is exactly what they were told us that they told us.
Are they like freedom gardens or something?
Right, yeah, exactly. Totally. They told us to build freedom gardens.
Well, you can't say us because I was born in 82. Well, maybe you, I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't there either. But the quote unquote conservatives of the time said to create and build a garden so you could, offer something to society. Now they're saying,
that was your way to support the war effort, John. That's different.
Oh, so now that the war is over, which by the way, there's always a war.
We're all about sacrifice when it's all about killing people.
We don't need to. Yeah, we don't need to sacrifice our green grass for something that's actually edible.
But would you say, because even a casual viewing of the movies, right? If I'm just a casual, hey, I watched the movies. There's a hard to miss ecological point. That Tolkien makes as the armies of Saruman devastate and decimate forests to forge their weapons of war, and obviously the Treebeard and the others are lamenting the loss of their forests to this mission. It's hard to miss that. I don't think you're making the one thing I thought was sort of unfair in the critique was somehow you'd made a stretch or a logical leap, and I'm like, I don't. It seems like it was right there in your face. Like Tolkien, on some level, had to have been an ecologist.
And in some level, and an environmentalist, but not necessarily in terms of like. See, and I never say like, okay, therefore he's for this legislation or this. Right. He's actually for an entire change of mind, the way we think of ourselves in relation to the planet. And I don't say that Tolkien argues that there's climate change. I simply say that Tolkien's critique of an industry, we have since learned, because we are an industrialized nation world, who has messed the planet up a lot. I think looking back that, I don't say he argues for climate change. I'm saying that we have noticed change in the climate, and people like Tolkien described it in his terms and his way of writing. That's all I'm saying. I don't go anachronistic and say he's arguing for climate change policy. Like I never even get close to that.
Right. Any more than Dr. Seuss, writing the Lorax is talking about. But the point is well made, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We can't simply I think Tolkien would probably say something like, we can't simply just consume to our heart's consent. I mean, we're just a consumerist society, and all we do is, if all we do is take, there's a point at which there's nothing left to take. And that's a fair point. It's got nothing to do with, I think the anachronism or the logical leap, the non sequitur, was on the part of the critique saying, well, he's getting political now. Like, no, I think he's making a point that Tolkien would have made.
Well, and I think that Tolkien does put things in the book where we can't help but notice the politics of it, like, or the economics of it. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that he was like, oh, Tolkien was anti-capitalist. But does capitalism not require more and more goods?
Yeah, for sure.
In order for the economy to grow. Well, what happens when we view the world like that? Well, Saruman found out when he took more and more and more wood and forest material to build his industrial war machine. And eventually the forest fought back and won. So I think the moral lesson there is, like you just said, Nat, as you consume and consume, there is a breaking point where things go horribly wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's inevitable, right? I mean, that's
right. I think so.
And again, that's a political statement in so far as, like, a very general sense. It's a political statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to conflate that with some sort of brand of partisan politics.
Yeah, like I'm a partisan hack. And he didn't say that to be fair, but to
be fair, he said he didn't know what your politics were. But even, and maybe I'm reading more into what he said and how he said it, that even his comment that, well, I don't know what this guy's politics are, leads me to believe he might find himself a little more on the conservative side, and he didn't like your introduction of a seemingly liberal topic into something he didn't think belonged there.
I guess, maybe.
I think it's a hard theme to miss. I think you'd have to intentionally miss it if you watch any of the movies or read the books. What I think is really cool is that, I don't know about John, but one of my earliest memories of reading, we grew up in a very literate household. My dad was a writer and we had books everywhere. And I think the first, like actual book without pictures in it, I remember reading was The Hobbit. I can still picture it stashed on my mom and dad had this little headstand on their bed that had a little bookshelf built into it. And I remember pulling books out of there. And like my first couple books was Robert Heinlein and Tolkien. And so the Hobbits have been in my, I don't know, I guess in my subconscious, like my entire life. And so what you bring to bear in this, I think, just fleshes out all that stuff that I had maybe not articulated, but kind of internalized. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's awesome, man. So there. What's up with that, John? Besides Wisdom of Hobbits, though, before we lose track of time, you've got other projects in the works. Is there any that you are at a place where you can talk about, or you want to hold off until another time to have a conversation about those things?
Oh, no. Yeah, we're doing a lot of things with choir. I actually finished the Wisdom of Hobbits maybe back in November and December, because I knew come January, all you needy authors out there needed my time to run this company. No,
I get my book out, bitch. No,
it's in your hands. Hey, don't mislead your listeners. I designed it. It's in your hands,
it's in my hands now. It's my fault. I know. But you've got, I'm really excited about the Choir Classics. I think that was a stroke of genius.
Yes.
That Tolstoy has landed on the number one spot in Amazon is just ridiculous. That's so cool. So Choir Classics.
Well, Choir Classics, we're kind of branding it as sorry to get political. As certain members of Congress and society ban books because out of fear of what they might do. They might teach us about our racist past or whatever. I'm being sarcastic. As Florida and other places ban books, we want to publish more books, and we want to bring reading back into the public consciousness as much as possible. So, Tolstoy's book, The Kingdom of God is Within You, was banned in Russia because it was very critical of the state, and it was first published in Germany and then the United States. So that's a banned book. Not that all of our books are going to be banned books or something. We just want to bring literature back into the cultural mindset. And so we have a book of poetry that was written by one of Tolkien's friends, Jeffrey Batch Smith, that we republished. And we republished David Bentley Hart's favorite books, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. And he wrote a foreword for us. And we have The Call of the Wild with a foreword by Sean DeJaw coming out, and William Paul Young's doing a foreword for The Prophet, and Brian Zahn's doing a foreword for Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. Beth Allison Barr is doing a forward for either the Iliad or Odyssey. I mean, we got some crazy shit coming out, man. Really excited for it.
I'm still pushing for a George MacDonald book. I'd like to do one for Lilith.
Oh, we're definitely going to do, I mean, we got to do unspoken sermons at some point. Or
fantasies. Right? I mean, fantasies is amazing if it's in the public domain.
Yeah. I'm sure all of it is. Yeah. Because,
I believe all of George MacDonald is in the public domain.
Weird story. John and I grew up with a guy, well, not with him, but in the same town as us, who actually was at one point one of the foremost. What would you call him? He was a George MacDonald scholar, and he
edited pretty much everything.
Edited and translated, tried to modernize a lot of George MacDonald. So he's got a huge catalog. This man is Michael Phillips, and Michael Phillips says, anyway, so I had grown up kind of having a knowledge of George MacDonald, but not nearly enough. So
I grew up in evangelicalism, so I had no working knowledge of him. Come to find out, I mean, he influenced Lewis and perhaps Tolkien very much theologically.
Well, the sad part is the person that Nat and I know also wrote an article telling you why George MacDonald was not a universalist.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, good luck with that.
He was. Sorry.
Which we all know he was.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like saying Karl Barth was, and it's like, yeah, but Karl Barth must understand the inevitable logic of his argument.
And I think, and I very well think he did. I think Lewis understood it more than he might have let on. But and I think Lewis is quoted as saying that there wasn't a book that he ever wrote that George MacDonald did not influence, that did not play a major. I mean, he considered him his master in a lot of ways. So I'm excited about the Choir Classics. I think it's great to look on Amazon and see like some of these books that had been forgotten about. Like, well, obviously not Alice, but Tolstoy's work back at number 1. Like that's really cool, and that you've gotten some really great people to write forwards. But there's other projects going on with the podcasts and the network, so we can definitely revisit at some point when some of that stuff becomes more formalized. But just so you know, choir is about doing big things, and man, John and I are just super, super happy to be part of it, man.
I'm glad you guys are too. And Bethany, I hope that just having me as a guest didn't scare you off from their show.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you, Matthew. This was just absolutely spectacular.
Well, we appreciate your insights. Thank you for chiming in. And
absolutely.
We thought we'd throw you in the deep end. Matt's the deep end. So if if you can, actually,
David Bentley Hart's the deep end.
No, you've been on your best behavior. There's not been one F word or.
I told you, we're talking about we're not talking about theology or the Patheos comment section.
So if we're talking about God, then we get a whole lot more fucks than if we talk about.
Of course, what is there to be mad about when you're gardening and going on a silly adventure?
Well, let me ask you this question, because I started and I forgot, but we just go back to the critique. The guy was like, he was talking about how you brought in like sort of an appendix, or you brought in a chapter about the flora and fauna of the Shire, and it was a little bit like, yeah, that's neat, I guess, if you're a gardener, but what's the point? I'm sure there's more than a point of just you like gardening. So talk us through that little bit.
Well, sometimes there is no point. Like sometimes it's like the minute you try to, what is it? Peter Rollins that says the minute you try to explain God, you diminish God. So Michelle Collins taught me that, and if it's wrong, blame her. But if it's right, I get all the credit. Is that a Trumpist way of going about it?
If Michelle said it, it's probably right.
It's probably true. No, I love Michelle. She's one of my favorite people ever. But yes, I mean, look, I like gardening. The reviewer, Josh, was absolutely correct. Obviously, this guy likes to garden. So, yeah, I mean, that's clear. Nailed it. Yeah, not a big shock there. But I think, okay, so if Sam wrote a book and he included all the plants that he grows in Bilbo's garden, you could say, what's the point, Sam? Because I like plants. I would imagine something like that. Like sometimes the point is obvious. Like this guy loves this part about the Shire. So this is what the author really wants you to also like. And if you don't like it, you skip the last appendix. Like I put it at the end. It's an appendix. It's not like, you need to now study this because I'm going to test you in chapter 8.
By definition, you can do without it.
You can do without it. You put it on because and I said it in the preface, I add these things just to bring some color to the book, to say that I want I want my love for Tolkien and for Hobbits and for the Shire to come through, and this is how I'm going to do it. There doesn't always need to be a point. Like, what's the point in, I drew a door, a Hobbit door that you open up as you go into chapter 1. What's the point? Well, because it looks cool when you're opening the door out to an adventure. Are you going in or out? I don't tell you. You can interpret it however you want. Sometimes when you create something, you let the reader, the listener, whatever you're doing, have their own interpretations of things.
Well,
so take from it what you will.
It's not lost on me that one of the most important things that Samwise does is reconnect the Shire to the land.
Yeah, my one big critique is in the films is that they don't have the scouring of the Shire.
Right, the scouring of the Shire and the loss of the party tree, right? Which is something that Samwise feels the need to reconnect the Shire to the land. So it's not lost on me that the importance of, if you want to somehow connect this to some biblical scholar, that the importance is that we need to have a reconnection to the land. And if you don't understand that, then you're going to let the planet completely get decimated.
One could say we need to return to Eden, a la Heather Hamilton.
Ooh.
Oh, look at you!
Wow. I tied it back.
With that book, I got to tell you, this is the part. Let's get Girardian for 1 second before we leave. As cool as it is, I love like designing someone's book and then seeing them have success and like open it up. That's one of my favorite things is like to watch them cry when they post a video of like them opening their book. It's like, there's nothing more touching than that. But damn it, Heather, when you do so well, and I've been publishing books for like 8 to 10 years, and you do better than like killing me. God damn it. Like she was like number 1 in every category. I'm like, okay, so I'm happy for you, but why you gotta do us like that?
But why you gotta shit on Matt at the same time? I mean,
come on, this is about me and my needs. No, this is the fun part of being like Ralph wanted authors to run choir, and then this is part of the one where it's like Keith and I had both said, and it's no secret that Keith's the most prolific author with choir, but we both had said like we don't want to be the biggest thing choir is doing. We want to create a situation. And this is part of our whole like mission is that the authors are the important part of the publishing company. Like it's author centric. Ralph's used that from the get go. Any changes we're making there's no changes to that stuff. Like we are author driven. We want authors to succeed. We don't want to be like some other publishing companies, and I won't name names, and I don't have disrespect for them, but they just kind of publish your book and then go do your thing. And choir has been that for a long time because Ralph had other jobs. And so that's not what he was able to do. And that's kind of why he passed it on to us. But we want to get authors out there and sell wonderful books because we believe in our authors. And, we think that the world would be a better place if more of our choir authors like Heather, I guarantee her book is going to change people's lives and for the better. Yes. I guarantee it. Yeah, I'm very confident about it. Same with Maria Francesca French. Same with Evan Sweeney. Same with the books that we have coming out. And so it's nice to see. It's really wonderful to see.
Yeah, we're having Maria on pretty soon, aren't we, John?
Yeah. She'll be on.
She's fantastic. She's really fantastic.
And she's done so well. Heather's done really well. Everyone has, again, you put it in the hands of the authors to have the success it feels like that they want to have. If they want to go out and hustle and do their thing, and they've shown us. Trust me, I'm paying attention to the things that they're doing. Oh, that's helping. Doesn't hurt that she wrote a fantastic book. That's really, really good. So, but no, we're stoked. And again, there's a handful of things we haven't even mentioned. Choir's getting their hands in all kinds of cool stuff. And so as we wrap things up, we start to wind this down. First of all, go on Facebook, connect with Choir there if you want to follow and be up to date on what's going on. Sign up for the newsletter. Make sure you're getting all the updates. But just go check Amazon and see what Choir authors are doing there, because in their spaces they're killing it. So I'm excited. When does this book drop officially?
Officially March 14th.
So March 14th.
So if this comes out before and you put a link in there and you pre-order, that's cool.
That's right. You're putting it out on Pi Day, which
someone mentioned that. I'm like, I'm not a mathematician. The reason I did it is Sam rescues Frodo from Cirith Ungol on that day, and I like that story. So
Yeah.
Well, I like pie, so I'm thinking
Who doesn't like
on
pie?
that day I will order your book and also eat a big chunk of blueberry pie or something. I don't know.
Chunk of pie.
Just and talk about circles and flat Earth and whatever else goes on.
Can we? If you ever talk about flat Earth, can you bring me back on? I love that.
You know what's really cool is we're actually going to have an interview with a guy who has a flat Earth debunking channel on YouTube.
Can I come in and pretend I'm a flat earther and debate him?
Would you?
Absolutely.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll give you a script. Because they only say like 5 things.
I will definitely do that.
Because they are all so dumb. But this guy's awesome though, because he runs a very successful YouTube channel. That's how he makes his living. And he just has these guys on, and but he's a Christian, so he gets to throw the whole, "Oh, you're just an atheist. You're just a godless heathen." It's like, actually, I'm a Christian. I know what the Bible says about the earth, and you're all anyway. So I might reach out to you and have you on for that. That would be fun if you could pair it. Get a bone up on the current flat Earth theology. It's doctrine. I don't know what you call it. Cosmology. They're flat Earth cosmology.
Yeah.
Then I'm pretty sure it includes sea turtles and I don't know whatever else. But anyway, that's so awesome stuff coming on. So yeah, connect with Matt if you haven't already. Like I said, there's a plethora. That's right. I said a plethora of work that's already out there, and there's more coming. And John and I are both involved in a couple other things that are on the way. So, man, we're stoked for all the stuff that is happening, Matt. We appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And Bethany, thank you for coming.
Bethany,
awesome.
thank you for being here. Trial by fire with Matthew Distefano.
I hope you stick around. I hope
so too.
Yeah.
She did well, and she just knew that if she wanted to get a word in edgewise, she just would have to jump in. That's what you kind of have.
Got to jump in.
You got to do.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yep.
John and I are just used to kind of just yammering on, and it'll be good to have another voice in there. So we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Well, can I say one last thing then?
Yeah.
If that's okay? Yeah. So right now the church is in the season called Lent, and Lent is very much, I believe, connective to the earth, because we recognize our mortality, and from dust we come from, and from dust we will return to. And the more we can connect ourselves to the earth, like the Hobbits did, I think the more that we are connected to our real selves, our true selves. And we stand on the carbon death of beetles, bark, and bones every day of our lives. And so maybe we need to take off our shoes and dig our feet into the earth and experience a little bit more of what God has created us to experience.
Beautifully put.
Wow.
Well said.
I can't top that.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.